Hi guys, this is Dandy. Hope everyone is doing well. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about an experience that I had this weekend. Not a BDSM experience, but a museum experience. And I thought it was kind of some good things to think about and very interesting, so I thought I would share. So this weekend, I went to the Summeroflove exhibit at the DeYoung Museum in San Francisco. For people that don't know, I live in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. I'm from this area originally. And it was my dad's birthday, and he was a young kid in the Summeroflove era. Well, he was 13, so he didn't participate in that. But he was alive at the time, and he's a big hippie. He loves tie-dye, and he's a very pacifistic person, so he really identifies with the whole hippie thing. So he said, let's all go to this exhibit. So we're like, okay, and I show up there, and they have all these really cool buttons, and everything's really colorful outside, even before you get in the exhibit. And, it's about the Summeroflove, which, if people don't know, was 50 years ago in the San Francisco area, and consisted of a lot of concerts, and kind of the first, really hippie movement. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience. So, I was with my dad, his fiance, and my godparents. Dad is not very conservative. My godparents are a little more conservative. So we're in the museum, and the first little section kind of introduced you to the concept of the Summeroflove, and that it was all these concerts, and there's a lot of really beautiful things on the walls, which you're seeing right now, including a lot of really gorgeous album posters and covers, which that time period are really well known for. So we get in the museum, and the first poster is a swastika in the American flag colors that says, "Are we next?" And this is essentially speaking about society and the way society was going. And it was really funny because my dad was saying, I know I'm talking a little political here, but my dad was saying, the way the country is going now, people could feel that same way. So it's interesting, even 50 years later, how people could feel very similarly, right? Even in a different situation. And then they talked about LSD pretty immediately. There was a whole section that showed some of the concerts, what it was like to be at the concerts, showed videos of the concert, photos of the concert, and talked about, the acid test. And that actually started off by the CIA, and then this guy was doing it privately, basically having parties. But I thought that was really interesting. They showed some of the fashion. They showed more, some of the actual poetry and audio from some of those concerts. And then the whole next area was a bunch of posters of all of the, band posters, and how it was I was listening to an audio at the same time that was telling me about these things. That's how I have a lot of this information. So the audio was saying that, the posters were meant to confuse regular people because the text was kind of all over the place, and that it was meant to make you think and sit and actually look at it. So that was really interesting. It definitely hurt my eyes after a while. I'm trying to remember each room here. This is hard. So then the next room had a little bit about community in the Summeroflove. So they talked about how there was this group called the Duggars, not the Duggars, the Doug, something like that. Not the Duggars, I don't know, something like that. And they had a clinic that they ran, community clinic, and they also had classes that they ran for people to learn how to be on the streets, because there was a lot of young people that came from all over the country and the world. And we're living on the streets, and I think we're gonna flash to the poster. There's a poster about free clinic. It says how to teach you how to avoid getting raped, getting STDs, and how to live on the streets. And I was like, okay, so that was very interesting. There was also a bulletin board that was originally from this free store that they had, where everything was free. You could just come in and take whatever. So there was some kind of very hippie culture there. But that was honestly one of the only really community-oriented sections, except this very tiny section about the Black Panthers. But I'll get to that in my commentary and when I go through the whole thing. And then there was a section about bell bottoms, about how people, this lady, everyone was asking them to take out the pants, and she decided to ask Levi Strauss if, I really think this is going to be popular. And she actually basically invented the bell-bottoms, made Levi tons of money, as we all know. And the next room was more about the posters and there's a couple clips that I'm going to attach that show the flashing LED version of the posters, which changes, are really cool. And then the next room, there was a little section about fashion and internationalism, and they have some really beautiful kind of more international dresses that are here, and they're really beautiful, and I like that section. That was one of my favorite sections because I love international stuff. Then there was more poster sections and kind of odds and ends section. There was an entire room that was like you were on, I'm assuming, what it's like to be on LSD. It was just a bunch of color and stuff, and I really found it anticlimactic. Then one of the last rooms had more posters and the audio was more about, the music and a little bit of the political stuff, but not really. And they had, music playing, Santana, and a bunch of live music from that time. They had album covers, and everything was so beautiful. And more fashion, which I just really honestly loved the fashion. That's probably my favorite part of the whole thing. And then the very last section, there was that very tiny portion about the Black Panthers, which talked a little bit about their food programs and some of the programs that they had in their community. And there was one poster, which I really loved, that said, "Women say yes to men who say no," which features a famous singing artist. I don't remember her name. Joni something, I think. She's the one on the left, and that's her sisters with her. And it talks about the Vietnam War. But that was one of the only things that was mentioned in the whole thing, about Vietnam. It mentioned in a lot of the other texts, they were counterculture, anti-Big Brother, right? But they didn't really go into it so much. It felt like it was more about the art and the, visuals. There wasn't a lot of content. And then there was one poster about the birth control pill. How, thank God there was the birth control pill. And the very end of the audio talked about how people thought, we lost. The hippies lost, but in reality they won in a way because of these women's programs that are now here and some of these other things. So I know that's maybe a boring little go through of the museum, but as you can see, the pictures are really beautiful. But what I really wanted to say on my audio here was, I thought that this museum was really missing a lot, and I understand that this is an all-ages museum, and of course I am an alternative lifestyler, and I identify as a hippie in some ways. I'm not a drug user or anything like that, but I do a lot of spiritual work, and, I'm alternative. It did talk about some of the alternative spiritual stuff, which I like that part. But as far as, they didn't really talk about social reform, except in the very end to say that some of it was one, right? And they mentioned the Black Panthers, and they mentioned that one free clinic. But they didn't really talk about any of that or really the effects of it. They didn't talk about sexuality at all. The only thing that was mentioned, again, was on that poster about how not getting raped and HIV and the birth control pill, I guess. But that's literally all there was, okay? And my one main point is, it's about the summer of love. Even when I was a child, I didn't sexualize it, but I knew that that's what that meant. It was freer in that way. Right? Even though I was a kid and I didn't sexualize it or think of it in a sexual way, my parents just educated me about history really well. So I didn't think about it in any corrupt, bad way. It's just that was a different kinds of thing where people were more free in all kinds of ways. And so I felt like if they had mentioned something like that, I felt like there should have at least been one section that talked about free love or about effects of that. And there's lots of really great articles that talk about the effects of the populations of the Summer of Love, getting STDs and things like that. I thought that was fascinating. That wasn't at the museum. That's something I found when I got home. And there's also articles about Summer of Love and the sexuality of it. And I just think, what a shame not to mention it at all. Or really mention the reform. And granted, the way that they marketed this is about the art and the music and the fashion. But I just feel what's the point? Why did I pay $25 plus $8 for the headphones to just see this stuff? It was cool, but I wanted to support my dad, so I would have done it either way. But from a consumer standpoint, why you're missing the bulk? And I know you don't want to maybe it was meant to be light. That's what my family said. Maybe it was meant to be light. And I'm well, it was just kind of lacking for me. And the big point here that I want to make in this video, and the part of the reason I'm doing this topic, This is a wonderful example about how society is afraid of sexuality. And I'm not ever suggesting to sexualize children. I'm not suggesting, saying things that are going to make more conservative people upset. Never ever am I trying to say, put sexual things or imagery in front of children. That's not what I'm saying here. But what I'm saying is like a simple little phrase or even a small section, very general about what that meant, the free love thing, there was more group stuff, whatever, in a very PC way. I think it could still be done and not need to be a rated R museum. So I honestly think that really shows how society is so against sexuality. I mean, they talked about acid for a whole room and a half, and they kept talking about acid, which isn't a mainstream thing, right? That's not a PC thing, and that's like a huge component of this event. And I feel like the sex part and the sexuality part was also a huge part, and it definitely affected a lot of things. One of the things that Master was saying was, it brought upon a lot of the change and people coming out in the gay leather community and in the gay community and various communities sexuality, and especially having the birth control pill. It just spawned so many things that actually probably paved the way for us in the small way that we're able to operate and do the things that we do, especially here in San Francisco, because this all happened in San Francisco. So I'm not saying this all ages exhibit should be a children, about with children should be a BDSM or all about the sex exhibit, but I just thought it was very unreasonable that there wasn't anything being talked about there. So let me know if you thought this was an interesting topic, if you were alive during the Summer of Love or have family that have stories. Yeah, please subscribe, comment, like. Love to hear all your comments. Love and light, guys. Bye.